The invitation that changed everything. Megan never imagined that a single phone call could change the way she looked at her family forever. For months, her 10-year-old daughter Lily had been counting down the days until her Aunt Claire's wedding. Unlike most children, Lily didn't care about fancy decorations or expensive food. She cared about preparation. Every evening after school, she would sit at the kitchen table with a small notebook. Inside it were pages filled with questions and reminders she had written herself. Remember to smile. Say thank you when someone compliments your dress. Don't interrupt conversations. Ask people how they are doing. Lily took social situations seriously because they didn't come naturally to her. She liked rules. She liked knowing exactly what was expected. Her older brother, Ethan, often joked that Lily prepared for family events like she was studying for an exam. But Megan knew the truth. Lily wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to belong. That was why Megan's heart broke every time she saw her daughter practicing conversations in front of the bathroom mirror. The wedding had become Lily's biggest project yet. She had already chosen a dress. She had memorized introductions. She had even asked her mother what topics were safe to discuss with strangers. Meanwhile, the rest of the family seemed obsessed with a completely different part of the wedding. Claire's fiancé came from a wealthy family. His father owned a successful company. His relatives were influential people with connections that could help businesses grow. Every family conversation somehow came back to the same thing. Important guests, important opportunities, important impressions. Megan hated the way people said those words. Because every time someone talked about making a good impression, it felt like they were talking about hiding anything that looked different. One evening, while Megan was preparing dinner, her phone rang. The screen showed Claire's name. At first, Megan smiled. She expected questions about seating arrangements or arrival times. Instead, the conversation would become one of the most painful moments of her life. Claire sounded cheerful at first. Then her voice became strangely cautious. She explained that the guest list had been finalized. The wedding would remain small and exclusive. Megan listened quietly. Then Claire delivered the sentence that changed everything. "Ethan is welcome to come," she said, "but we think Lily shouldn't attend." For a moment, Megan thought she had misunderstood. She asked Claire to repeat herself. Claire did. This time, the meaning was impossible to miss. They wanted one child there, not the other. And the reason had everything to do with appearances. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. Megan looked toward the dining table, where Lily was carefully decorating a card she planned to give the bride. The child had no idea her place at the wedding had just disappeared. "What exactly are you saying?" Megan asked quietly. Claire sighed. She explained that there would be influential guests, important business connections, people who might not understand Lily's behavior, people who could judge, people who might feel uncomfortable. The words sounded polite, but the message underneath them was brutal. Your daughter is a risk. Your daughter might embarrass us. Your daughter doesn't fit the image we want to present. Megan felt anger building inside her. Not loud anger. The dangerous kind. The calm kind. The kind that arrives when someone hurts your child. She tried reasoning. She offered solutions. She promised to stay by Lily's side all evening. But Claire had already made up her mind. The decision had been discussed by the entire family. According to them, excluding Lily was simply the easiest option. And that was the moment Megan realized something painful. Her family wasn't protecting Lily. They were protecting themselves. As the call continued, Megan suddenly noticed movement near the hallway. She turned. Lily was standing there. No tears. No dramatic reaction. Just silence. In her hands was the handmade card she had spent days creating. Megan immediately knew. The child had heard enough. Children often understand more than adults realize. Lily didn't need every detail. She only needed a few words. Not invited. Shouldn't come. Better this way. Those phrases alone were enough. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Even Claire's voice faded into background noise. Megan could only focus on her daughter's face. There was disappointment there. Confusion, too. But what hurt the most was acceptance. As if this wasn't the first time Lily had felt unwanted. Slowly, Lily lowered her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. One word. That was all. No argument. No questions. No tears. And somehow that made it worse. Because children should not become experts at handling rejection. After ending the call, Megan sat beside her daughter. She wanted to explain everything. She wanted to protect her from the truth. But some truths refused to stay hidden. Lily carefully folded the wedding card. Then she placed it inside a drawer. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Almost respectfully. Like she was putting away a dream. That night Megan barely slept. Memories kept returning. She remembered when Lily was younger. How certain fabrics made her uncomfortable. How loud environments overwhelmed her. How family members called her sensitive. Difficult. Strain. Dramatic. Years later, specialists finally explained what nobody else understood. Lily was autistic. The diagnosis didn't change who she was. It simply gave a name to experiences she had always lived with. For Megan, the diagnosis brought relief. Not because anything was wrong with her daughter, but because she finally understood how to help. Unfortunately, the rest of the family never truly accepted it. They treated autism like an inconvenience. Something to manage. Something to hide. Whenever Lily spoke honestly, people called her rude. Whenever she became overwhelmed, people called her dramatic. Whenever she needed support, people acted embarrassed. The wedding incident wasn't an isolated event. It was merely the latest chapter in a story that had been unfolding for years. And for the first time, Megan realized she was tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of defending. Tired of asking people to treat her child with basic respect. Late that night, she opened the family group chat. Messages were already appearing. Suggestions. Explanations. Excuses. Everyone wanted her cooperation. Nobody wanted accountability. Megan typed only one sentence. "We will not be attending." Then she placed her phone face down. The reactions arrived immediately. Some accused her of overreacting. Others insisted it was only one day. Several family members claimed she was creating unnecessary drama. But Megan no longer cared. Because for years, she had been teaching Lily that she deserved respect. Now it was time to prove those words meant something. The wedding day arrived 3 weeks later. While the rest of the family attended the lavish ceremony, Megan stayed home with Ethan and Lily. To her surprise, the day turned out better than expected. There were no judgmental looks. No forced conversations. No pressure to perform. The house felt peaceful. For the first time in weeks, Lily looked relaxed. They watched movies. Ordered food. Played board games. And slowly, the tension began leaving the room. Megan hoped the situation would end there. She was wrong. The real consequences had only begun. A month later, Easter approached. Traditionally, Megan hosted the family gathering. Everyone expected another invitation. Instead, she made a different choice. She invited cousins, aunts, family friends, but not the people who had excluded Lily. There was no announcement. No dramatic speech. Just a quiet boundary. Predictably, the backlash arrived within hours. Family members demanded explanations. They accused Megan of being cruel. Some claimed she was dividing the family. Others insisted she should forgive and move on. Megan read every message carefully. Then she wrote a response that changed everything. "You excluded my daughter because you were afraid she might embarrass you. Therefore, you are not welcome in my home." The group chat exploded. For the first time, relatives who knew only part of the story began asking questions. Had that really happened? Was Lily truly excluded? Why had nobody mentioned that before? Suddenly, the narrative was slipping out of the family's control. People wanted answers. And answers can be dangerous when the truth is ugly. The next morning, Megan received an unexpected phone call. It was from Claire's husband. He sounded confused, concerned, almost shocked. Apparently, he had never heard the full story. When Megan calmly explained what happened, silence filled the line. Eventually, he thanked her for being honest. Then he hung up. Nothing seemed unusual at first. But over the following days, tension began spreading throughout the family. Conversations became strained. Messages became shorter. Certain people stopped speaking entirely. Something was happening behind the scenes. And Megan had a feeling the truth was finally catching up with everyone. For years, appearances had mattered more than honesty. For years, people had hidden their behavior behind polite smiles. Now those masks were beginning to crack. And when they finally broke, the fallout would be bigger than anyone expected. Part 4, the confrontation. 3 days after the group chat exploded, Megan heard an aggressive knock at her front door. Not a normal knock. The kind that announces anger before a single word is spoken. Ethan immediately looked up from the couch. Lily froze. Megan opened the door and found Claire standing outside. Her expression wasn't sad. It wasn't apologetic. It was furious. Claire stepped forward without greeting anyone. "What did you tell him?" she demanded. Megan knew exactly who she meant. "Your husband called me," Megan replied calmly. "I told him the truth." Claire's face tightened. "The truth," she laughed bitterly. "You made me look horrible." "No," Megan answered. "Your decisions did that." For a moment, neither woman moved. The tension felt heavy enough to fill the entire doorway. Claire accused Megan of ruining her marriage. She claimed family members were turning against her. She insisted that Megan should have protected her instead of exposing what happened. But every accusation sounded stranger than the last. Because nowhere in Claire's argument was there any concern for Lily. Not once did she ask how her niece felt. Not once did she express regret. Everything was about herself. Her reputation. Her embarrassment. Her problems. Then Claire made a mistake. She glanced toward Lily and muttered, "This whole situation happened because people don't understand how difficult she can be." The words hit the room like a bomb. Lily's face immediately changed. The little confidence she had rebuilt over the past few weeks disappeared. Megan stepped between them. "Leave." Claire looked shocked. "Megan, leave now." For the first time, Megan wasn't trying to keep the peace. She wasn't negotiating. She wasn't explaining. She was protecting her child. Claire eventually stormed away. But the damage had already been done. That night, Megan sat beside Lily and promised something she should have promised years earlier. No one would ever be allowed to treat her like a burden again. Part 5, the invitation nobody expected. A week later, Megan's parents appeared at her house unexpectedly. Unlike Claire, they arrived carrying smiles and homemade food. The performance was obvious. They wanted something. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, the truth finally emerged. A family dinner was being planned. Everyone would be there. Claire, her husband, his parents, business partners, relatives, important people. Megan listened carefully. Then came the real reason for the visit. The business relationship between Claire's new family and Megan's parents had become strained. Questions were being asked. Concerns were spreading. People were discussing the wedding incident. And suddenly, the family desperately wanted unity. "We want Lily there too," her mother said quickly. "We'll do whatever she needs. Quiet spaces, special food, break areas, anything." The offer sounded generous. But Megan noticed something important. The concern wasn't for Lily. It was for appearances. Once again, her daughter had become useful only when other people were watching. After her parents left, Megan discussed everything with Ethan and Lily. Ethan immediately shook his head. "They don't mean it." Lily remained quiet. Finally, she asked a question. "If I go, will they actually want me there?" The room fell silent. Megan knew there wasn't an easy answer. Because being invited and being welcomed were not always the same thing. Still, she saw hope in Lily's eyes. A cautious hope. The kind people carry when they've been disappointed before. Eventually, Megan agreed to attend. Not for her parents. Not for Claire. Not for anyone else's reputation. She agreed because Lily deserved one genuine chance to see whether people could change. Unfortunately, some people never do. Part 7, The Truth Nobody Expected. For several long seconds, nobody answered Nathan's father's question. The silence itself felt like an answer. Megan watched her parents carefully. For years, they had always found the perfect words. The perfect excuses. The perfect explanations. But now, sitting across from people they desperately wanted to impress, those words seemed to have disappeared. Finally, Megan's mother forced a nervous smile. "Of course not," she said. "We love Lily. We were only worried about possible misunderstandings." Nathan's father leaned back slightly. His expression didn't change. But something about his eyes suggested he had already reached a conclusion. Then he said something nobody in the room expected. "People spent most of my life worrying about misunderstandings too." The room became completely still. His wife looked down quietly. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, as if he already knew what was coming. Megan's parents looked confused. Then the older man continued. "I'm autistic." The words landed like thunder. Claire's face lost all color. Megan's father blinked repeatedly. Her mother looked as though someone had suddenly changed the language of the conversation. No one spoke. No one moved. The successful businessman everyone admired. The man whose approval everyone had been chasing. The person they believed represented perfection. He was autistic. The very thing they had treated as a problem. The very thing they had tried to hide from their wedding. And now the entire room was being forced to confront that reality. The older man explained calmly that he had spent decades learning how to mask his differences. He learned which expressions people expected, which behaviors made others comfortable, which parts of himself needed to remain hidden. He had built a successful career, created businesses, led companies. Yet throughout his life, people still treated autism as something shameful, something that needed fixing, something that should stay invisible. As he spoke, Lily slowly lifted her head. For the first time that evening, she wasn't looking at her plate. She was listening, really listening. Because someone important was speaking about experiences she understood. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. Part 8, a lesson the family could not escape. The older man turned his attention toward Lily. His voice softened. Not out of pity, out of respect. "Lily," he said, "there is absolutely nothing wrong with the way your mind works." The little girl stared at him. Her eyes were wide, uncertain, hopeful. He continued. "The world often rewards people for fitting in, But many of the greatest ideas, inventions, and achievements came from people who saw things differently. Nobody interrupted him. Nobody dared. Because every word exposed the uncomfortable truth sitting at the center of the room. The problem had never been Lily. The problem had been everyone else's assumptions. He explained how exhausting it can be to spend years pretending to be someone you're not. How damaging it is when children feel responsible for making other people comfortable. How painful it becomes when acceptance feels conditional. Megan noticed tears gathering in Lily's eyes. Not sad tears. Relieved tears. The kind that appear when someone finally understands you. Then Ethan quietly reached over and squeezed his sister's hand. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Across the table, Claire looked increasingly uncomfortable. The confidence she normally carried had vanished. Every excuse she had used over the past few months now sounded ridiculous. Every justification sounded cruel. And deep down, she knew it. Nathan's father wasn't yelling. He wasn't attacking anyone. Yet somehow his calm honesty felt more powerful than any argument. Because facts don't need volume. They only need truth. Eventually, he turned toward Megan's parents. His expression became serious. "What concerns me," he said, "is not the decision itself." Everyone looked confused. If someone makes a mistake, they can learn from it. He paused. "What concerns me is that none of you seemed concerned about how Lily would feel." The room fell silent again. Because there was no defense for that. No explanation. No excuse. Only guilt. And guilt can be very difficult to hide. Part 9, the beginning of the end. The atmosphere in the room changed completely. Nobody was pretending anymore. The carefully constructed image Megan's family had worked so hard to maintain was falling apart right in front of them. Nathan's father stood slowly. His wife stood beside him. Then Nathan rose from his chair as well. The movement immediately caught everyone's attention. Megan's mother looked nervous. "Please," she said quickly, "let's not make any decisions tonight." But the older man shook his head. "I already have." The sentence hit harder than anyone expected. Claire looked terrified. "What does that mean?" she asked. For a moment, nobody answered. Then Nathan's father spoke clearly. "Trust matters." His gaze moved around the table. In business, in friendships, and especially in family. He explained that successful partnerships depend on character. Not appearances. Not status. Not wealth. Character. And what he had witnessed over the past few weeks had raised serious concerns. The wedding decision. The excuses afterward. The refusal to take responsibility. The attempts to shift blame. None of it reflected the values he expected from people he worked with. Megan's father immediately tried to defend himself. He called it a misunderstanding, a family disagreement, an unfortunate mistake. But the explanation came too late. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. Nathan remained silent until the very end. Then he looked directly at Claire. His expression carried disappointment more than anger. And somehow that hurt even more. Because anger can fade. Disappointment tends to stay. Without another word, Nathan followed his parents toward the door. Claire called after him. He didn't stop. The front door closed. The sound echoed through the house. And in that moment, everyone understood something important. This wasn't the end of a disagreement. It was the beginning of consequences. Consequences that would continue unfolding long after that dinner ended. Consequences that would force every person involved to confront the choices they had made. As Megan looked at Lily sitting beside Ethan, she realized something else. For the first time in years, she wasn't worried about what her family thought. She wasn't worried about keeping peace. She wasn't worried about fixing problems she didn't create. She only cared about the 2 children sitting beside her. And somehow, that felt like freedom. Part 10, the fallout begins. The days following the dinner felt strangely quiet. At first, Megan thought perhaps the worst was over. She was wrong. The silence wasn't peace. It was the calm that often arrives before major consequences. For years, Megan's family had relied on appearances. They believed that if something looked successful, respectable, and impressive from the outside, people would never question what was happening underneath. But appearances have limits. And once doubts begin spreading, they are difficult to stop. A week after the dinner, rumors started circulating among business contacts. Nothing dramatic at first. Just questions. Concerns. People asking for clarification. People wondering whether certain stories were true. Megan wasn't involved in any of those conversations. She wasn't making phone calls. She wasn't telling anyone what happened. The truth was moving on its own. And sometimes truth travels faster than gossip because it doesn't require exaggeration. Meanwhile, Claire's marriage was becoming increasingly unstable. Nathan had become distant. Not cruel. Not hostile. Simply distant. The kind of distance that appears when trust has been damaged. Every conversation between them reportedly ended the same way. Claire wanted to focus on the embarrassment she had experienced. Nathan wanted to discuss the reason that embarrassment existed in the first place. Those conversations never went well. Back at home, life looked very different. Lily seemed lighter. She smiled more often. She spent less time worrying about saying the wrong thing. For years, she had treated every social interaction like a test she was afraid of failing. Now she was slowly beginning to understand something important. Not everyone deserved her effort. Not everyone deserved unlimited chances. And not everyone deserved a place in her life. One evening, while helping Lily with homework, Megan realized something surprising. Her daughter wasn't asking nearly as many questions about being accepted anymore. She wasn't constantly seeking approval. She wasn't trying to become smaller. And that small change meant more to Megan than any argument she had ever won. Because confidence doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in tiny moments. Tiny decisions. Tiny victories. And Lily was finally collecting them. Part 11, cracks in the foundation. About a month later, Megan received a call from one of her cousins. The conversation started casually. Then the cousin mentioned something unexpected. Several important contracts connected to Megan's parents' business had not been renewed. At first, Megan didn't think much of it. Business relationships change all the time. But over the following weeks, similar news continued arriving. Clients were leaving. Partnerships were ending. New opportunities were disappearing. The business that had seemed stronger than ever suddenly appeared fragile. For Megan's parents, the situation was terrifying. They had spent years building their reputation. Now that reputation was being questioned. And the most frustrating part was that they couldn't blame a competitor. They couldn't blame the economy. They couldn't blame bad luck. Because the real problem wasn't financial. It was personal. Trust had been damaged. And trust is often more valuable than money. Meanwhile, family relationships were deteriorating just as quickly. Relatives who once remained silent were starting to speak up. Some admitted they had always been uncomfortable with the way Lily had been treated. Others confessed they simply hadn't wanted conflict. A few apologized directly to Megan. Not because she demanded it. Because they finally understood what had happened. The more people learned, the harder it became for Claire and her parents to control the narrative. Every explanation created new questions. Every excuse revealed new contradictions. And slowly, The version of events they had carefully protected began falling apart. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing something unfamiliar. Accountability. Not revenge. Not punishment. Accountability. The natural consequence of choices nobody had wanted to acknowledge. And accountability can feel incredibly unfair when someone has spent years avoiding it. But that doesn't make it unjust. It simply makes it uncomfortable. Part 12, The Price of Choices. By the end of the summer, the situation had become impossible to ignore. Nathan and Claire were no longer living together. Friends close to the family confirmed that separation had become permanent. The wedding that had been treated as the beginning of a perfect future now felt like the starting point of a collapse. Claire struggled to understand how everything had gone wrong so quickly. From her perspective, she had made a practical decision. A reasonable decision. At least that was what she kept telling herself. But the problem with harmful choices is that intentions rarely erase consequences. Whether she meant to hurt Lily or not, she had hurt her. Whether she intended to reveal her values or not, she had revealed them. And once people see who you are during difficult moments, they rarely forget. Megan occasionally heard updates through relatives. Apparently, her parents were still insisting that the entire situation had been exaggerated. Still claiming they had been misunderstood. Still searching for someone else to blame. But fewer and fewer people seemed interested in accepting those explanations. Because at some point, every story reaches a place where facts become impossible to ignore. And this story had reached that point. One evening, Megan sat in the backyard watching Ethan and Lily laugh together. The sun was beginning to set. The air was cool. And for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. No arguments. No family pressure. No emotional negotiations. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that arrives when you stop fighting battles that were never yours to fight. As she watched her children, Megan understood something she wished she had learned sooner. Protecting peace sometimes requires disappointing people. Setting boundaries sometimes creates conflict. And choosing your children over toxic expectations is never something you should apologize for. She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know whether relationships would ever heal. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Lily would never again have to earn the right to belong. Because the people who truly loved her had already made their choice. And this time, they chose her. Part 13, The Unexpected Letter. Nearly 3 months passed without any direct contact from Megan's parents. No surprise visits. No emotional messages. No attempts to restart old arguments. For the first time in years, silence felt healthy. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email. Not a text message. A handwritten letter. Megan immediately recognized her mother's handwriting. For several minutes, she simply stared at the envelope. Part of her wanted to throw it away unopened. Another part needed to know what it said. Eventually, she sat at the kitchen table and opened it. The letter was long. Several pages long. At first, it sounded familiar. Her mother talked about family, memories, traditions, the importance of forgiveness. But as Megan continued reading, she noticed something missing. There was no apology. Not a real one. No acknowledgement of Lily's pain. No acceptance of responsibility. Just explanations. Excuses. Attempts to rewrite history. The letter described the wedding situation as a misunderstanding. An unfortunate mistake. A communication problem. Megan felt disappointed. Because after everything that had happened, her mother still seemed unable to face the truth. Then she reached the final page. One sentence immediately caught her attention. Your father and I are struggling more than you realize. For the first time, the letter sounded honest. Not manipulative. Not defensive. Just tired. Megan set the pages down and stared out the window. She didn't feel satisfaction. She didn't feel victory. She simply felt sad. Because the people who had created so much damage were also suffering from it. But sadness didn't change reality. And reality was simple. They had repeatedly chosen pride over accountability. Now they were living with the results. That wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. Part 14, Lily finds her voice. As the adults dealt with the consequences of their decisions, something remarkable was happening in Lily's life. She was changing. Not because someone fixed her. Not because she became different. Because she finally felt safe enough to be herself. At school, teachers began noticing the difference. Lily participated more often. She volunteered answers. She joined conversations without rehearsing every sentence beforehand. For years, she had spent enormous amounts of energy trying not to make mistakes. Trying not to stand out. Trying not to become a target. Now that pressure was slowly disappearing. One afternoon, Megan attended a school presentation. Parents filled the room. Students stood nervously near the stage. Lily was among them. A year earlier, public speaking would have terrified her. Now she walked confidently to the front of the room. Her voice trembled slightly at first. Then it grew stronger. She spoke about problem solving, about thinking differently, about seeing patterns others often missed. The audience listened carefully. When she finished, applause filled the room. Real applause. Not sympathy. Not politeness. Respect. Megan felt tears gathering in her eyes. Because she suddenly realized something important. The people who once viewed Lily as an embarrassment had completely misunderstood her. They focused on differences and missed strengths. They saw challenges and ignored intelligence. They noticed discomfort and overlooked courage. After the presentation, a teacher approached Megan. "Lily is remarkable," she said. Megan smiled. She already knew. The difference was that now Lily knew it too. And confidence built from self-respect is far more powerful than confidence borrowed from approval. For the first time, Lily wasn't waiting for permission to belong. She understood that she already did. Part 15, the final meeting. 6 months after the wedding, Megan received another unexpected message. This time it came from her father. The text was short. "Can we meet, just once?" Megan stared at the screen for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore it. Part of her was curious. Eventually, she agreed to meet at a small coffee shop. Nothing dramatic. Nothing private. Just a conversation. When she arrived, her father already looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence he once carried seemed diminished. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then he finally broke the silence. "I made mistakes." The words surprised Megan. Not because they were profound. Because they were rare. Her father had spent years defending every decision. Now, for the first time, he sounded honest. He admitted that he had prioritized opportunities over people. He admitted that he had ignored warning signs. He admitted that he should have defended Lily. The conversation wasn't perfect. There were still excuses mixed into the truth. Still moments where responsibility became blurry. But it was more honesty than Megan had heard in years. Eventually, her father asked the question she had expected all along. "Do you think things can ever go back to normal?" Megan looked at him quietly. Then she answered, "No." The word wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was simply true. Because normal had been the problem. Normal was pretending. Normal was accepting disrespect. Normal was sacrificing peace to avoid conflict. She didn't want normal anymore. What she wanted was healthy, respectful, honest. Whether that future included her parents remained uncertain. As they prepared to leave, her father looked disappointed. But he didn't argue. For perhaps the first time in his life, he accepted an answer he didn't like. Megan walked out of the coffee shop feeling strangely calm. Not because everything was fixed, because she finally understood that healing and reconciliation are not the same thing. Some relationships recover. Others don't. And both outcomes can be okay. As she drove home, she thought about Ethan. She thought about Lily. And she realized that the strongest families aren't the ones that stay together at any cost. They're the ones willing to protect each other when it matters most. Everything else is secondary. Part 16, a different kind of future. The following year looked nothing like the one before. There were no family emergencies. No dramatic phone calls. No tense holiday dinners. No endless arguments about who was right and who was wrong. Life became simpler. And that simplicity felt like a gift. Megan focused on her children. Ethan focused on school and sports. Lily continued growing into herself. The family wasn't perfect. No family is. But it was peaceful. And after everything they had endured, peace felt more valuable than perfection. For the first time in years, Megan stopped looking backward. She stopped wondering what she could have done differently. She stopped replaying old conversations in her head. The past remained where it belonged. Behind her. The future, however, was just beginning. Part 17, the moment nobody saw coming. Nearly 2 years after the wedding, Lily received an invitation. This time, it wasn't from family. It was from her school. She had been selected to participate in a regional innovation competition. Students from across the state would present original ideas and creative solutions to real-world problems. When Lily first received the letter, she read it 3 times. Then she handed it to Megan. "Do you think they sent it to the wrong person?" she asked. Megan laughed. "No, sweetheart, they sent it to exactly the right person." For weeks, Lily worked harder than anyone expected. She researched. She planned. She revised her presentation over and over again. The same determination that once made her practice wedding conversations now fueled something entirely different. Confidence. Purpose. Belief in herself. On the day of the competition, dozens of students filled the auditorium. Parents sat in crowded rows. Judges reviewed presentations. The atmosphere felt intense. Yet Lily remained calm. Not because she wasn't nervous. Because she finally understood that being nervous didn't mean she wasn't capable. When her turn arrived, she walked onto the stage. The audience became quiet. And then she began speaking. Not the rehearsed version of herself. Not the masked version. The real version. For 20 minutes, she explained her project with passion, intelligence, and clarity. The judges listened carefully. The audience listened carefully. Nobody was focused on what made her different. They were focused on what made her exceptional. When she finished, the room erupted into applause, louder than she had ever experienced before. And this time, Lily smiled without hesitation, because she knew she had earned it. Part 18, the end of one story, the beginning of another. Several months later, Megan received unexpected news through a relative. Her parents had finally stopped blaming everyone else. The business was gone. The partnerships were gone. Many friendships had faded. Time had forced them to confront truths they had spent years avoiding. According to the relative, they talked about Lily differently now. Not as a problem. Not as an inconvenience. But as someone they had failed. Whether that realization came too late was another question entirely. Meanwhile, Claire had moved to another city. Her marriage was over. Her life looked completely different than the future she once imagined. Megan didn't celebrate any of it, because revenge had never been the goal. Protection was, and protection had succeeded. One evening, Megan sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Inside the house, Ethan and Lily were laughing about something neither of them could explain properly. Their voices drifted through the open window. The sound made her smile. Years earlier, she had believed family meant keeping everyone together. Now she understood something far more important. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by behavior, by loyalty, by respect, by who stands beside you when standing beside you costs something. Lily walked outside and sat next to her. She wasn't the little girl who had once hidden wedding cards inside a drawer. She wasn't the child who questioned whether she deserved to belong. She wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She belonged because she existed. Nothing more was required. After a few minutes, Lily looked toward the fading sunlight. "Mom." "Yeah." "Do you ever wish things happened differently?" Megan considered the question carefully. It was the kind of question that deserved honesty. Finally, she answered, "I wish people had made better choices." Lily nodded. "Me too." Then she smiled. "But I like where we ended up." Megan felt her throat tighten. Because that simple sentence contained years of growth, pain, courage, and healing. She wrapped an arm around her daughter. Together, they watched the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon. And in that quiet moment, Megan realized something. The wedding had never been the most important part of the story. Neither was the business. Neither was the divorce. The most important part was that one little girl learned she never had to earn her worth. She never had to shrink herself for acceptance. She never had to apologize for being different. And once she understood that, nobody could take it away from her. Not family. Not strangers. Not the world. Some stories end with revenge. Some end with justice. This one ended with something even better. Freedom. The end.